Good afternoon. Again, I thank Rabbi Silverstein, the Kehillah, for giving me the schus to learn together with you. It's become part of Yontiv and the Simcha of Yontiv for me to be able to come and in the schus of the tzibur hopefully find a new light on the Yontiv that comes in. Also, we should mention, we should have kavanah for the refuah shalem of those who were injured in Australia just now in the there was a very bad pigua, at least from what I saw, at least 10 Jews were killed at a Chanukah gathering that Chabad made in Sydney, and obviously many wounded. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should protect us from all and send refuahs and yeshuas. So I always feel this need to try and find something unique and different when I come here to Ner Avram before Yontiv, and I daven for it, really. And here HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent me, they print up drushes that were said by the Klausenberger Rebb Zatzal in previous years. His drushes were very long and complex. He was a gaon in all areas of Torah. It's also important, and it will be important for what we're going to be learning from him here today, that to know his history, that he went through the war, that he lost his wife and 11 children, and then came out and rebuilt so much Torah and refuah. He built the Laniado Hospital in Netanya as well. And there are certain things which we're going to see that he said that none of us really can say, but it's important to hear him saying them, at least. So he starts off with a question you find in a variety of places. The Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch brings down that if a person forgot Al Anisim in benching, in Birkas HaMazon, so then when you get to the Harachamons at the end of benching, you say, Harachamonu Yaselanu Nisim Niflos, Kshem Shosisol Avisenu Bayamim Bayim Bazman Hazeh, and then you continue on to be Mei Matisyo. Okay, that's your fallback if you forgot Al Anisim. And the question asked is, how is a person able to ask Hashem to do miracles? Okay, we don't ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do miracles. It may even be, so to speak, spiritually dangerous to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do miracles because you may lose some of your schuyas. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has set up the world with the systems, and he decides when to do miracles. So I'll just mention parenthetically an answer that Rav Melech Biderman brought down just because it hit me so hard. He said that we know the principle, Karav Hashem lenishberei lev. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close to broken-hearted people. He said a person was sitting there on Chanukah and he had lunch and he forgot to say Al Anisim, and he realizes that person's going to be so brokenhearted. What happened to me? Ribono shel olam? What kind of person am I that on Chanukah I forgot to say Al Anisim? And then your heart's so broken you can ask for things other people can't usually ask. That's an important musar in there to get. So he brings, the Klausenberger starts his approach in the following way. He brings from the Choseh V'Lublin, Sefer Divrei Emes. In Koheles we say, Yesh Osher Shomer L'Bailav L'Ra'ah. There is wealth that is sometimes protected for the one who owns it, but for his detriment. It's not good for him. Okay? The Chavos Avos brings this down as one of the reasons why you see sometime when you look, you say, Lama Derech Rishoyin Salechu, you see some mafionaire who's, so wealthy, and just the fact that he has wealth doesn't mean that that's something good necessarily. Okay? Now, spiritually, one of the biggest dangers the wealth can bring is Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivot. Right? Yeshurun, meaning Am Yisrael, can get fat, get satisfied, and kick and rebel. Right? A person can do that. Right? What is the Lashon in the Pasuk? Pen Ivorish v'ganavti, lest I become poor and steal, and pen Ashir v'kichashti, lest I get wealthy, and I'll deny, and I will kick. I'll say, who is Hashem? So, however, this depends qualitatively on how this blessing comes to you. Meaning, there are different levels of hashpah, of influence, of sending things into this world. And qualitatively, these things can be different. The wealth that comes to a person, l'ra'aso, which is not for his good, qualitatively comes from a different place in Hashem's system. But, he says, if the shefa comes from a makar kadosh v'tahar, from a source which is entirely kadosh and pure, from the source of chesed and rachamim, from a place which is gavoa me'al gavoa, which is above all these systems, then tuva gonis begave. That gift which Hashem sends is only containing good inside of it, and will in fact bring about ribui or hakadusha. That gift, when it comes to the person, will bring about light of Torah into his life, will bring about kedusha, and the person will be misara l'shanas darko. The person will be aroused, awakened to change his way in life, right? To become a person who does good things and has yiras shamayim, and he'll become a different person. Okay, so there is such a gift which can come min hashamayim that contains bracha, and instead of the negative effects that can sometimes come with a bracha that comes from a different place, or at least a shefa, an amount of something, a wealth, the wealth that comes in that way is totally containing bracha and will bring about bracha. Right? This is the Arvei Nachal says this on the pasuk in Mishlei Birkas Hashem Hitashir. The bracha of Hashem brings wealth, v'lo Yosef etzev ima, and it does not bring along any sadness with it. That's what we're talking about. Now, that's not just for the idea of wealth; it's also for miracles. And again, I should note, I am mixing some things in here that are not brought by the Klausenberger, so none of that is his fault. That's my fault. Okay, we find that there are miracles that also have different effects upon people that don't necessarily bring such spiritual bracha. For example, it is asked, Eliezer came to find a kala for Yitzchak, and he saw when Rivka came that the waters rose up to her. Okay, we know that this is something of bracha, a supernatural gift which is there. So why in the world did Eliezer go on to test her midos? The search should be over. You see this girl comes out and the water supernaturally rises up for it to draw the water. Clearly this is the one. So the Talmud Rebbe answered, he said, we find other people who had this though. Yaakov Avinu gave that bracha to Paro. Didn't make Paro a tzaddik. Right? He happened to have that. It could be as a result of a certain bracha. It could be a result of a certain schus that's in a person's spiritual makeup, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is a tzaddik or that it's even making them a tzaddik to have it happen. There's an idea of nisim that happen that are a test to a person and can actually cause him to become worse. I heard this from Rav Shalom Shvadron Zatzal. He said about a medrash that describes how Dasan and Aviram crossed Yamsuf, that they waited behind the sand dune to see what would happen. Am Yisrael went through. The Mitzrayim went in and got drowned. Dasan and Aviram walked up to Yamsuf. Two little doors opened, one for Dasan, one for Aviram. Right? They flew first class. All of Am Yisrael went economy, and they flew first class. And that did not help them in their ruchnius. In fact, this was what gave them the arrogance to later take on Moshe Rabbeinu and to accuse him of things and to fight against him. So the very fact that something miraculous happens doesn't necessarily bring about a result of good and kedusha and ruchnius which is there. So we have to see what type of miracle we're asking for in that harachman. We don't ask about every miracle that happened in Tanakh. Hashem do miracles for us like that miracle, and like that miracle, and like that miracle. Here we say specifically about this miracle. And the Klausenberger went on to find now diyukim, different points in the language of Al-Hanisim, which particularly describes the war. So he says, there are extra words. We say, Va'ato b'rachamecha harabim, and you, Hashem, right, in your great mercy. Why? And you, right? You can just say, U'b'rachamecha harabim, and in your great mercy, right, you saved us. U'la'amcha Yisrael sisa tshua gedola, and to Am Yisrael you gave them a salvation, a tshua that was very big. We're giving, marks for how the Yeshua was, what makes one bigger than the other. Right? In the Kedushas Levi, he already asked, he says, if you look at the war with Sancheriv, that seems to be a much bigger Yeshua than happened on Chanukah. There, we were surrounded by a massive army, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused it that they all went crazy and ran away. We didn't have to pick up a sword, nothing happened. We have no yontif for that. So it's hard to know how they are described. He asks, we say in Al-Hanisim, and afterwards, your children came to Dvir Beisecha, the Beis Hamikdash, Upinu es Heichalecha, and they cleared out the Heichal, right, which was full of Avodah Zarah from the Greeks and other things. V'idliku neros b'chatzos kodshecha. He says, why is that listed as a nes? Right, the fact that you did clean up, right? In other words, if something happened here in the shul, and everybody chipped in and started to clean up the shul, would we view that as a nes? Right? Why is that in there? Along with that, his final question he asks, why is there one word in Aramaic? We say, the word purkon is Aramaic. The entire Alanism is in Lashon HaKodesh. It's a question asked by the Bnei Yisachar and others. So now let's try to see how he approaches these things. The status of Am Yisrael in Ruchnius at the time of Chanukah was very low. And this was the clear attack of the Yevonim. Right? We find the Rambam describes the different things that the Yevonim did. It adds even Pashtu Yodam b'mamonom v'bitom, that the Yevonim took Am Yisrael's finances and their daughters. Right? There was the terrible Gezerah of a Bas Yisrael Shenises before a Jewish girl could get married. Tiboy lehegmon tchilo, she had to be taken to the Greek governor first, and they had to, the Gemara in Ksuvos talks about how they had to try and hide weddings, etc. So this was part of their campaign. Right? I saw Rabbi Shechter, my Sheshiva said that the Misyavnim lived well. It was only targeting Jews who kept Torah and mitzvahs. The Misyavnim were a fairly wealthy class. They were doing well. Those Jews who became Hellenized. Here there was this entire pressure to change Am Yisrael and to get them to give up their approach to Yiddishkeit, which is the authentic one. When the Hashmonaim went out to fight, so they were worried of the danger, which is always there, that if they would be victorious, because the outlook which was there in Am Yisrael at the time, which was the Greek outlook, which was nothing involving Hashem or Siyata Dishmaya, if they would win, then there would be that reaction of Kochi V'Otzem Yodi. Right? And unfortunately, there are people just go into great detail as to how the reason that the Maccabim won is because they had better knowledge of the terrain and better understanding of guerrilla warfare, etc., etc. Some of them, I've even heard them say, why do we light candles? Because that's the way they used to signal themselves when they were out laying ambush to the Greeks. They would signal each other with candles or something like this. Okay, so they were worried about this. So here comes the nes. We say, you Hashem, right, with your great mercy, means this is the type of miracle that was described by the Chozeh of Lublin. That idea that you sent a miracle that came from the source of great mercy. You brought a Yeshua in the war that would also give birth, so to speak, to Yeshua in Ruchnius. It could have done the opposite. But when they were victorious in the war, then it brought about a return of Am Yisrael. Not all of them, but obviously much more than the little handful that was there. Right? They came, and that symbolized Va'achar kach bo bonecha. Suddenly they identified as bonecha, as your children. They came lidvir beisecha. They came to the Beis Hamikdash to clear it out. It affected them. It changed them. It brought that. And this explains why you have the word purkon. The Sfarim say that when we have things in Aramaic, it's oftentimes something which is hidden. It's hidden from view. It's not there. For example, the Koshin Shemagid says, when we say in Oz Yoshir, Hashem yimloch the olam voed, Hashem will reign forever, we say the Aramaic, it's Hashem ko'im l'olam omeyo. He does rule, present tense, for always. Meaning, the eyes can't see it. That's what we say in Lashon HaKodesh. But the emes that's hidden, that we say in the Aramaic, which is there. So Tshuva Gedola Upurkan means it was something that saved Am Yisrael, truly, but hidden inside of it, inside that military victory, was Purkan. Was that which would be able to transform Am Yisrael, not just then, but forever, would be able to bring about this turnabout. So this answers the question of how you're able to ask for a miracle. To ask for a miracle in Ruchnius, he says, you're allowed to do. Right? For example, we say it in davening, he says, "V'chofes yitzreinu lishtabed lach." Subdue my yetzer hara, to be in servitude to you, to serve you. I'm asking Hashem, intervene in my Ruchnius. He gave me yetzer hara, force it. He says, if a person is standing there saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. I read the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. I have all the X's, right? I'm echtav ashuv. I'm doing averos thinking that I'm going to do tshuva afterwards. He gives 24 things that can prevent tshuva. I got them all. So, please, intervene. Do something. If you're going to say that I'll lose from my schuyas, number one, I don't even know if I have schuyas, and I'll happily give them up to be able to do the right thing. He says such a request a person is able to do. A request for Ruchnius. The Bnei Yisachar on Chanukah says, the Pasuk in Tehillim, Zecher osan l'niflaos of Chanun Rachum Hashem. Zecher, he made a memory for his wonders. Hashem is Chanun, giving, V'rachum, and merciful. The idea of Zecher relates to the idea of Zochar, the male. In Chazal's literature, the male is always viewed as the mashpia, one who gives, right, in the birth process. The man is the one who gives, the mother is the one who receives. He says, we want nisim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes a zecher l'niflaosa for those miracles that give birth, right, that are meir l'doros, that give light forever. We don't have a Yom Tov for every miracle in Tanakh, right? Some of them may have seemed even bigger, right? We don't have a Yom Tov for every miracle in the Hasidic stories I read, right, which also sometimes seem bigger. Only certain things were put in, right, this idea, the kvius, that would be there each time. Chanun v'rachum Hashem, the midah of Chanun means, v'chanosi asasherachon, it will help even Jews who aren't worthy of being helped, right? Whoever it is, rachum Hashem, it will come from love, meaning it's defining for us the qualitative aspect of the miracle of Chanukah. The miracle of Chanukah came in order to bring about a revolution inside people of their ruchnias. It came about to help people even if they weren't deserving of it. It came from a place that was so high with Hashem's love and mercy that it wouldn't have negative effects, that it would have positive effects. And he explains also that that's why among the different halachas that are there with Ner Chanukah, in Haneros Halolu we only talk about Ein Lanu Reshus Lishtamish Bohem, to emphasize to us that the true result of the miracle of Chanukah is only in the aspect of Ruchnius. The fact that we can't use it for our Gashmius is representative of the point of the miracle. The entire goal of the miracle was the blessing of Ruchnius that would come afterwards. So here he goes on to explain some of the minhagim of Chanukah that seem so puzzling. Right? The idea of playing dreidel. You can find many, many explanations in the Sfarim of the dreidel and what it represents, and especially with the dreidel that has Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin, is Gematria, I think, Mashiach, and also Nochash, and many, many things written in the Sfarim about it. But the Klausenberger, who was very, very into Hasmada, right? It's well known, his programs for learning and the testing, Mifal Hashas that he started, all these things. He said, why in the world should we be letting people gamble on Chanukah? It really does not seem like a Jewish type of thing. He says we're actually play acting, representing the people who were affected by Chanukah. He said so many of Am Yisrael were out there wasting their time. We're playing games. We're separated from Torah. He says that's something that we're able to show with the playing the dreidel. Says that the miracle of Chanukah reached even them. And with this, he explains a minhag that I'd never heard of before. And he says it's a minhag that was prevalent in Hungary. He saw it in the shul of his father, who was a great Talmud Chacham, the shul of his father-in-law, who was a great Talmud Chacham. And that was that when the shamash lights the candles in shul between Mincha and Ma'ariv, the little kids throw things at him. I don't think this is going to go in there from. I don't think it's going to be in the protocols that are up on the wall, right? They would throw shmatas and they would even throw snow until sometimes the shamash had to run away. So he said when he was young, he just couldn't understand this. And he looked at his father, he looked at the Rabbonim, expected them to intervene, and they seemed to be fine with it. And he said that the purpose of that, again, is to show what the state of Yiddishkeit was at the time. That a Jew who came to do a mitzvah publicly would be scorned and reviled and have everything thrown at him. My son said he heard a more nigla type of explanation, that is to try to make clear that nobody is yotze with the lighting in shul. Right? In other words, you can't not light at home because in shul. So he said that's why it's done. And he said he heard also that it is still done in certain shuls today. Okay, sounds like fun. So now this plays out also in different halachas of Chanukah. Many Sfarim mention. The Gemara in Shabbos tells us the psilos u'shmanim, those wicks and oils that we cannot use for Shabbos, you can light with them on Chanukah. These wicks and oils are ones that the oil doesn't draw well into the wick, that the fire dances around and doesn't stay well. So he said that represents, right, the very idea of the wick drawing the oil into the fire represents the transmission of Torah, the Masorah, that even those people who are not affected on Shabbos because they became so distant can be affected by Chanukah, which is there. It's lit at night, right, in the time of darkness, which is there. And all of this shows, he says, that such people can be awakened to be bonecha, to recognize where they come from, and then to gather around, to devir beisecha, pinu seichalecha, to want to clear out, to want to make things change and get done. And this is something I point out every year, that every Jew has this connection to Chanukah, has this power, no matter who they are or what they've done. We find, number one, that most of them like to light Ner Chanukah. And that Ner Chanukah has Kedusha, right? Even if a person's a Mechal Shabbos, when he lights Ner Chanukah, I can't use his Ner Chanukah. And the Ran says that the reason we can't do it is because it has the same Kedusha as something in the Beis HaMikdash that he lit on his windowsill. That's the power of what happens. So for miracles like that is what we're asking. We're not just asking for Am Yisrael to be saved. Certainly we do that. But when we're asking for it to be done miraculously, it's not just because it'd be so much better if our enemies would simply disappear miraculously. We're asking for a miracle that will affect us. We're asking for something that contains Asisa Chua Gedola, a great salvation. So a lot of Sfarim talk about the title of Shabbos HaGadol. They talk about why is it called Shabbos HaGadol? Because Shabbos contains what's going to come in the week. It contains the Pesach, which is going to be there. Our definition of a Gadol in Halacha is someone who's able to bring forth children. That's the basic definition. The different simonim we have for maturity, whether of a young man or a young woman, have to do with the ability to bring forth next. Chua Gedola means a salvation that didn't just change the tide at the time, but gives birth and continues to give birth to this very day. So now we get to where the Klausenberger Rebb did something that he would often do, is he would speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he would speak in a way that I think is something I heard from Moshe Shapiro said once, it's a mode of tefillah which is called koach hataina, to, so to speak, argue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said, not many people can do it right. For a person to be able to have the schus and the purity and to know how to do it. But this is what he did and what he does. And he says the following. He says, Kvar kolu kol hakitzin. He says, we've passed all the times that this should be over already. He says, Lo ho'ilu atzaras, harigos, shmonos, gezeros. He says, all of the tzaras Am Yisrael went through, Lo ho'ilu, they didn't work to make us become better. He said, so much Jewish blood was poured over thousands of years. We don't find that it brought about this total turnaround of tshuva for Am Yisrael. If they would have done tshuva like that, the Gula would have come. Didn't happen. Right? He says to Hashem, he says, Habet mishamayim ur'eh shederech zeh lo ho'il.
The Rebbe Shalom looked down Min Hashemayim and see, it doesn't work. That way of doing things doesn't work. I heard a recording of him speaking, and he said, you know, one thing I didn't see during the war in the concentration camps? He said, I never saw a Baal Tshuva. He said, maybe there were, I didn't meet one. He said, but now after the war, Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us, he said, some tzikarlach, some candies. Let us come back to Eretz Yisrael. Let us rebuild some Torah. He says, now there are a lot of Bali Tshuva. He said, Rebbe Shalom, it's worth it for you to give us candies instead of giving us, makas. He said, that's something that we see and we're able to ask for, to hope that that will happen. He says, we know that unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps us, we can't defeat the Yetzer Hara. Chazal tells, Yitzur Shalom Mischari Shal B'chol Yom. Person's Yetzer Hara renews itself every day, takes a new form, has new kochos. Only with HaKadosh Baruch Hu helping us can we defeat him. Says the Klausenberger to Hashem, since you have to help us anyway, right? So why not do it this way, right? Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh. Send from that source of Kedusha, Yeshua, that's going to help us come back, to help us do what should be. He says, after all the tzaras that we went through under Hitler Yamach Shmo, he says, not only does those tzaras not help, he said, they caused us to lose our minds. Daitu nitrafa aleim. We lost our minds, he says. And when a person loses their mind from pain, kul madar kompanim, everybody just went their own way. The bitzo, to try and just make some money, or the tavos, to try to have some pleasure in life. He says, and it's at the extent that when people are keeping in Torah and mitzvahs, they become a laughing stock. He says that's why this harachamon is there. When we want to know, and this is really what's there in Chanuka. Sometimes, little kid is there when you're lighting Neros Chanuka. They ask, are our Neros going to last for 8 days too? No, I don't think so. Should we daven to Hashem that our Neros will last for 8 days? No, that's not what this is about. So what are we davening for? A military victory, that we should defeat our enemies who are attacking us? Yes, but a type of Yeshua that will bring about a Yeshua Gedola, Upurkan Gemazeh, that will affect us so positively with bracha and bring about that spiritual turnaround, that will reach to all different nefashos, to the gamblers, and to the ones who are throwing snowballs at the Shamish and Shul, and to everyone who's far away, that this should help. So therefore, he finishes with the following. He says that the Bnei Yisachar says, Gam la'osid al yachzu b'tshuva mitoch adchak ki gzeres hayavanim. He says that even in the future, Am Yisrael will not return in tshuva out of pressure from gezeres like from the Yavanim. Ki im kshayoyer lahem me'or hagonus. Only when Hashem enlightens us with that or hagonus, that hidden light, which the Sfarim say is in the Ner Chanukah. V'hoyeles erev ye'or. Right, a pasuk in Zechariah says that when it comes time for night, that's when the light will come. So this will eventually happen, and this is a result of the miracle of Chanukah that goes on. He says, he asked, Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh, from that source of Kedusha, which only brings down bracha. Umitzion Yisodeko, Tzion, he says, represents Limud HaTorah, Kimitzion Tetzei Torah, the other place in which the Aragonus, the hidden light is hidden, is in the Torah, which is why Chanukah is a Yom Tov of Torah. So he finishes, Yazor Hashem Yisborach Hashem help, Tov Hashem Lakol, Hashem is good to all. Racham Al Kol Ma'asav, his mercy is on all of his creations, and he says that after all he went through. Shekol B'nei Yisrael B'chol Makom Sheim, that all Jews, wherever they are, B'chol Makom Es Moshe Seim Di B'chol Asar V'Asar, wherever they're living, all over the world, B'chol Makom She'esh Shlish or Revir Yehudi, when it's only a person who is only what you call a fractional Jew. Yikabetz Nitachenu Me'arba Kantvos Eretz, he should bring us all together from the four corners. V'yoshienu Baruchni Yasu B'gashmius, and Hashem should save us spiritually and physically. Ibnei Chayu Mezoni Revicha, by giving us shefa in our children, in our finances, in our health. This month, you said this is at the beginning of Kislev at the time, the end of our tzaros, right, the beginning of our redemption,
That was the way he finished that thing. So again, I think, especially in our times, in these years, and everything that we're going through, we see we should have a picture now of what we're asking for, right? We're lighting this, and we want Bayom Mohem Bazman Hazeh. We want what was then to happen now, but you have to know what happened then. And why it was qualitatively different than so many other nisim that we had. And why Chachamim Davka made that one that would be a yontiv, kavum va'asom, that they set them and made them to be that. And Kodesh Baruch Hu help us see that light in the Ner Chanukah, in our lives, and eventually in the whole world. Wishing everyone a lichtige Chanukah.